Crossing the Douluo continent, Lin Yi was born in the Seven Treasures Liuli sect. He was accused of marrying Ning Rongrong and grew up together, accumulating a deep affection. But when his awakened martial soul was only an abandoned martial soul with only half a level of innate soul power, the cold expression on Ning Rongrong's face greeted him. Lin Yi, from beginning to end, I just treat you as a friend. Please don't contact me again in the future, I'm afraid others will misunderstand. Lin Yi, feeling disheartened, chose to leave the Seven Treasures Glass sect, only to find that her martial soul could constantly evolve. Several years later, at the mainland China Advanced Soul Master Elite Competition, Lin Yi's martial soul had already completed its advancement, and he became a well-known powerhouse among the younger generation in the mainland. Lin Yi, who is she? Someone asked as they looked at Ning Rongrong, who had a face full of regret. Oh, just a friend, Lin Yi replied lightly. Keywords of the novel. Douluo. I am in love, Ning Rongrong. What are you in a hurry? No pop-up window. Douluo. I am in love, Ning Rongrong. What are you in a hurry? Download the full text. Douluo. I am in love, Ning Rongrong. What are you in a hurry? Latest chapters to read. Chapter 1. Abandoned martial soul and born full abandoned soul power. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Abandoned martial soul and born full. Abandoned soul power, innate soul power, half level. Martial soul, rusty sword. The voice of the soul saint responsible for awakening the martial soul trembled slightly, with a strong sense of surprise and disbelief. The core disciples of the Seven Treasures and Glass sect, as well as the disciples of the affiliated sects, who were gathered around, were also stunned for a moment, and then a burst of noise erupted. What is the situation? How could this be possible? How could Brother Lin Yi's innate soul power be only half level? Isn't he the proudest disciple of Sword Douluo? When he was born, he caused Sword Douluo's 7 kills sword spirit to roar for a long time. Even Sword Douluo Chinshin said that when Lin Yi grew up, he would fight with him. How could his martial soul be just a rusty sword? Lin Yi, don't be nervous, maybe the awakening crystal ball is broken. The soul saint, who had a soul power of 79 levels and was only one step away from the soul Douluo, quietly swallowed his saliva. He thought he was someone who had seen great storms before. Today, he was ordered by the sect leader Ning Fengji to awaken the martial souls of a group of children. Everything will be under his control. But who knows, he thought he was almost certain that Lin Yi, who was naturally full of soul power and top-notch martial soul, would come up and give him a big laugh. You should know that Lin Yi is the most proud disciple of Sword Douluo. He has even been designated as the guardian of Miss Ning Rongrong in the future. Sword Douluo and Master Ning have even made an advance engagement between him and Miss Ning Rongrong. If such a person only has half-level soul power and is still a useless martial soul, heaven knows what will happen. Known as Lin Yi, he is a 6-year-old child. He was wearing a loose black shirt, with black hair and black pupils. Although his features were immature, they exuded a heroic aura. It can be expected that when he grows up, he will be a handsome young man. Faced with this decisive moment of fate, Lin Yi's face did not panic at all, but calmly said, "Thank you very much." Seeing such a young child with such magnanimity, Soul Saint couldn't help but feel a favor in his heart. He carefully selected the crystal ball that was the clearest and had the best awakening effect for martial souls. "Don't be nervous, put your hands on it," said the Soul Saint as he injected his soul power into the crystal ball. Golden dots of light appeared and continuously transmitted through the crystal ball, entering Lin Yi's body. He closed his eyes, his expression somewhat painful. After a moment, the brilliance dissipated, and a black iron sword quietly emerged behind Lin Yi. Its design is quaint and luxurious, but it is covered in rust and looks like scrap metal no matter what. Still rusty sword. The whole scene was silent, and everyone couldn't believe what was happening before them. Only some disciples who were already jealous of Lin Yi couldn't help but show a mocking smile at the corners of their mouths. It's really interesting that a person who is valued by everyone and regarded as a proud son of heaven has an abandoned martial soul. Let's test your soul power, the soul saint sighed in his heart. Based on his experience, he naturally guessed what was going on now. Abandoned martial souls cannot have naturally high soul power. That is to say, there were no issues with the test results just now, and Lin Yi, who was expected by everyone, was indeed just a useless soul master. Lin Yi's face remained expressionless as he reached out and placed his hand on the crystal ball. A cold touch emanated, with twinkling stars on the crystal ball. Looking at the dim light, Soul Saint shook his head and said in a tone of regret. Innate soul power, half level. To be fair, he still likes the Lin Yi in front of him very much. He has a stable and polite personality, and can still remain calm in the face of moments that determine fate. Moreover, he is also very good looking. But Douluo continent is like this. Without good martial souls and innate soul power levels, you are just a waste. Upon hearing these words, Lin Yi's expression was slightly pale, but he still squeezed out a smile and bowed to the Soul Saint, thank you. Stepping down from the test bench, various voices of discussion echoed in my ears. The eyes of others looking over were filled with surprise, disbelief, and many contemptuous looks. For those malicious gazes, Lin Yi didn't care. He looked in a certain direction of the stands not far away. At the most central position there, 3 figures sat. The middle one is a middle-aged man wearing a moon-white robe. He is handsome, elegant, and looks both approachable and majestic. He is the current leader of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect, the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland, Ning Rongrong. And beside Ning Rongrong sat 2 elderly men. One of them had an emaciated face and a ghostly aura on his body, while the other was spirited and had bright eyes. He was like a soaring sword, making it difficult to look directly at him. They are naturally the 2 titled Douluo of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect. Gu Douluo. There is also Sword Douluo. I'm sorry, Master, you've lost face. Lin Yi came to the center of the stands and walked up to Jian Douluo, speaking in a guilty tone. During the 6 years of traveling to the Douluo continent, Jian Douluo has taken careful care of himself. From the moment I remember, Jian Douluo has never been inferior to him. Not only is his food and clothing the best, but he also trusts and looks forward to himself extremely. I was able to make a name for myself in the 7 Treasures Glass Sect largely thanks to Sword Douluo, who almost regarded me as the future title Douluo for promotion. It's okay, Jian Douluo seemed to be too shocked by what was happening before him to speak. He squeezed for a long time before finally uttering 3 slightly dry words. Ordinary martial souls are not incapable of cultivation, but what about half-level innate soul power? There is still a possibility of becoming a strong one. Every martial soul is valuable, Lin Yi. Ning Rongrong also spoke up, his tone gentle, like a humble gentleman, making people feel like basking in spring breeze. But with half-level innate soul power, it is indeed difficult to cultivate. If you don't mind, you can manage some industries of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect. Those industries are not too many, but it is still possible to ensure that you have no worries about food and clothing for a lifetime. I will naturally take care of my disciples, so I won't have to worry too much, sect leader. Sword Douluo suddenly spoke up. This somewhat impolite remark made the nearby Gu Douluo shudder. On weekdays, Sword Douluo shows great respect to Lord Ning. Is it difficult for him to be in a bad mood because his disciple's martial soul has awakened? But that's also because your own disciple is useless. What's the relationship with Master Ning? Ning Rongrong was also stunned for a moment, and then he shook his head with a bitter smile. It's me Meng Lang. He originally thought that after Lin Yi accepted his conditions, he would naturally propose another matter. But looking at the current situation, it seems unlikely. The awakening of the martial soul is still ongoing. Douluo originally hoped that Lin Yi would sit by his side. After all, he took too much care of Lin Yi before. Now that Lin Yi's soul power is half-level, his martial soul is also a useless martial soul. If it weren't for him to cover it up, he might have been targeted. But, Lin Yi in his past life was an orphan, and he crossed over when he was a few years old. Although his character was more mature than his peers, he was just a child. He felt that he had already made Douluo feel a bit embarrassed. Even if Douluo didn't care, he absolutely didn't want to continue like this. Without hesitation, Lin Yi sat directly away from the stands, with no one around, appearing particularly desolate and lonely. And in everyone's eyes, such a scene is another interpretation. Is it difficult? Due to Lin Yi's useless martial soul and Trash's innate soul power level, Sword Douluo has already been disappointed in him and is ready to give up on him. Among the disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, the most dazzling one is a girl wearing a bright yellow short skirt. Her face is still somewhat immature, but her skin is fair and her facial features are delicate. It can be expected that she will grow up to be a beautiful embryo. More importantly, it is the position she is sitting in. In the martial soul awakening ceremony, there is also a particular emphasis on the position each person sits in. The core disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect sit in the center, while the disciples of the affiliated sects sit on either side. At the central position of the core disciple, the next head of the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect, who has been appointed internally, is sitting there. They have the best bloodline and often have the highest level of soul power and martial soul. Rongrong. Beside the girl in the yellow dress, there was a plump and delicate-looking girl who did not come to awaken her martial soul, but only accompanied Ning Rongrong. Do you want to comfort Lin Yi? He's probably not feeling well now. Everyone knows that Ning Rongrong has a particularly good relationship with Lin Yi. From childhood to adulthood, the two of them have been stuck together, and even Ning Rongrong used to shout everywhere when he was young, waiting for himself to grow up and marry Lin Yi. Forget it. Ning Rongrong shook his head, his delicate little face looking a bit ugly. After Lin Yi awakened an abandoned martial soul with only half-level innate soul power, there was much discussion on the field. Many people may not dare to discuss her, but they also look at her with curious eyes. In this situation, the thought of having a good relationship with Lin Yi in the past made her face feel a bit hot and embarrassed. Soon, 2 or 3 core disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect awakened their martial souls. Their innate soul power is above level 6, and they are all auxiliary martial souls. Although they have not awakened the strongest auxiliary weapon martial soul on the continent, such as the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda, which is on par with the 9 Hearts Begonia, they are also quite good and may become the Soul Emperor and Soul Saint in the future. After the awakening of the martial souls of these disciples, the Soul Saint responsible for awakening the martial souls also calmed down a bit. Is that right? In places like the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, those core disciples should all be geniuses. Soon, one disciple after another successfully awakened their martial souls, some were happy and some were sad. Next, Ning Rongrong. Soul Saint glanced at the list in his hand and said aloud. And just as this sentence sounded, everyone's gaze focused on Ning Rongrong. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda. What would be Ning Rongrong's martial soul? Everyone present is looking forward to it. You should know that her father is Ning Fengji, the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland. Come on, Rongrong. When Lin Yi awakened his martial soul, he didn't feel too nervous. At this moment, he felt his heart tugging. Having been with Ning Rongrong for so long, he has already regarded her as his younger sister and naturally hopes that she can have a good future. Moreover, when he realized that his martial soul was only a useless martial soul, with only half a level of soul power, and that his highest achievement in the future could only be to become a high-level soul master in the 20s, he had already made up his mind to find an opportunity to break through his engagement with Rongrong. I am already a waste, of course I cannot drag others down, here we go. Ning Rongrong slowly stood up and walked towards the martial soul awakening platform. Every place she passed by, everyone consciously gave way. When she stood on the awakening stage and faced the martial soul awakening crystal ball, countless gazes fell on her. This feeling of widespread attention made Ning Rongrong both nervous and enjoyable. Place your hand on the crystal ball and feel the surge of power within your body. The soul saint in charge of awakening the martial soul swallowed his saliva, feeling for the first time that it was so difficult to awaken the children's martial souls. Just now, the disciples of Sword Douluo have awakened an abandoned martial soul. If Lord Ning's daughter also awakens a useless martial soul, he cannot imagine what will happen. Okay. Faced with this soul saint with a soul power level of 78 and only one line away from the soul Douluo, Ning Rongrong nodded obediently and reached out his slender and white palm to stroke the crystal ball. The touch feels slightly cold. She instinctively wanted to withdraw her hand, but then a warm force began to surge from within. The dazzling brilliance bloomed from the crystal ball, several times stronger than the genius with innate soul power of level 7 just now. When Lin Ye's soul power awakened, the faint light that bloomed compared to the light that Ning Rongrong's soul power awakened at this moment was more like the light of a grain of rice and the bright moon, with an extremely large difference. What is this? The soul saint responsible for awakening the martial soul's pupils shrank slightly and lost his voice, saying, innate full soul power. Innate soul power often represents the potential of a soul master. The higher the level of innate soul power, the faster the speed of cultivation, and the higher the realm that can be reached in the future. Generally, those with innate soul power reaching level 6 are already considered quite rare geniuses. It is only in the 7 treasures and glass sect that a large number of upper 3 sects are mastered, and those with soul power reaching level 7 are also highly cultivated in various factions. As for innate geniuses full of soul power, they may not exceed 10 fingers in the entire continent. Innate full soul power. After this sentence was spoken, the whole room fell silent for a moment, and then a deafening commotion erupted. What is the concept of innate full soul power? The current leader of the 7 treasures glass sect, Ning Rongrong's father, had only 9 levels of innate soul power back then. However, even so, he and the 2 Douluo warriors, Sword Bone, also supported the glory of the 3 upper sects of the 7 treasures and glass sect. Now Miss Ning Rongrong is naturally full of soul power. What will happen to the 7 treasures glass sect when she grows up? Is it the first sect in the world? Lin Yi, who had been staring at the martial soul awakening platform without blinking his eyes, was also genuinely happy for Ning Rongrong. He did not expect that the little girl who always followed behind him back then would be such a genius. Test your martial soul, Ning Fengji's voice suddenly sounded from the stands. Even if a person born with full soul power is their own daughter, there is no special expression on their face. And by his side, the 2 most beloved Douluo titles of Ning Rongrong, Gu Douluo's smiling face had already opened its folds, like a blooming chrysanthemum, while Jian Douluo always had a cold expression. Okay. Soul Saint nodded and continued to explain, feel the surge of soul power inside your body, and try to summon your martial soul. Ning Rongrong was originally enjoying the cheers of those people when suddenly interrupted by her own father. She looked over in a strange way, unable to understand why her father had no reaction even though she was naturally full of soul power. And Grandpa Jian Douluo doesn't seem too happy either. Her spare light turned to the corner of the stands, where the young man in a black robe saw a smile on his face, as if he was happy for himself. He immediately turned his head in frustration and looked at the crystal ball in front of him. Raise your hand and gently stroke. Another icy and cool touch. Ning Rongrong strives to make his martial soul emerge. For children who have awakened their martial souls for the first time, summoning their own martial souls is often a very troublesome task. But with just a gentle raise of her hand, as soon as she called out in her heart, a colorful pagoda measuring several feet in length quietly emerged. The precious light flickers, and the precious aura is pressing. At the moment when this pagoda emerged, a louder noise erupted than before. Because the pagoda of Ning Rongrong has 8 floors. 7 treasure glass. No, it should be the 8 treasure glass pagoda. Not to mention the soul saint responsible for awakening the martial soul, even those soul Douluo level worshippers, including Bone Douluo, became excited and lost their composure on the spot. Some elderly people even shed tears on the spot. God bless me, 7 treasures of the glass sect. In the realm of martial souls, the 7 treasures glass pagoda is an extremely special type of martial soul, with strong auxiliary abilities. For every additional soul ring added by the soul master, the opponent's amplification can increase by 10%. But there is also a limitation that the owner of the 7 treasures glass pagoda soul cannot exceed level 80. Even the strongest owner of the 7 treasures glass pagoda soul, known as Ning Fengji, the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland, is only at level 79. As soon as Ning Rongrong's pagoda awakens, it has 8 layers, indicating that her soul power level can be upgraded to at least 89 levels in the future. In the future, there is even a possibility of evolving into the 9 treasures glass pagoda and becoming a level 90 titled Douluo. Even if she is not Ning Fengji's daughter, relying solely on the martial soul and innate full soul power of this 8 treasure glass pagoda, these elders of the 7 treasure glass sect will firmly push her towards the position of future sect leader. 1, 2, 3, or 8 layers of pagodas. At this moment, Ning Rongrong was also counting the layers of her martial soul with her fingers. When she reached the 8th layer, she only felt a surge of blood rushing up in her heart. She knew that her father Ning Fengji's lifelong goal was to break through the limitations of the 7 treasure glass pagoda and transform her martial soul into the 8 treasure glass pagoda and the 9 treasure glass pagoda. And when my martial soul first awakened, I achieved half of this goal. Lord Ning, upon seeing Ning Rongrong's joyful expression, Sword Douluo should have been happy. After all, Ning Rongrong was also the one he watched grow up with. But when he saw the boy sitting in the corner of the stands, appearing so lonely, yet still applauding and cheering for Ning Rongrong, his tone suddenly became extremely cold. You need to give me an explanation. Chen Xan, are you crazy? How could you talk to Master Ning like this? Gu Douluo frowned and said, your own disciple's talent is not good, why don't you make Rongrong happy? On weekdays, his relationship with Sword Douluo Qinshin is actually very good. But today is a day of great joy for the entire 7 treasure glass sect. As he watched Ning Rongrong grow up, he showed his innate full soul power and the terrifying talent of the 8 treasure glass sect's martial soul. Even if Sword Douluo was feeling a bit upset about his disciple Lin Ye's situation, he couldn't be disrespectful to Lord Ning repeatedly. Ah! Ning Fengji waved his hand and stopped Gu Douluo's words. He sighed and spoke. When the martial soul awakening ceremony is over, I will explain it clearly to you. For Lin Yi, I will definitely give corresponding compensation. As soon as these words were spoken, the expression on Gu Douluo's face slightly changed. What is the relationship between Ning Rongrong's awakening of martial soul and Lin Yi? Is it difficult? Is there a hidden truth in between? At this moment, the martial soul awakens on the stage. Ning Rongrong's mood at this moment can only be described as complacent. She used to be the little princess of the 7 treasures and glass sect, doting on countless things. Now, she has directly broken the martial soul restrictions that generations of 7 treasures and glass sect leaders want to break, feeling that her life has reached its peak. But the only thing that made her feel a bit uncomfortable was, on the stands, the young man sitting in the corner was looking at himself from afar, with a bright smile on his face, as if he was happy for himself. In fact, if there was jealousy and dissatisfaction in Lin Ye's eyes, Ning Rongrong might still feel a little better in his heart. However, Ning Rongrong, who had just awakened his martial soul and had greatly enhanced his vision, could clearly see that Lin Ye's eyes were incredibly clear, without any jealousy or negative emotions, full of comfort and joy. And his expression made Ning Rongrong full of displeasure and annoyance. Why are you looking at me like this? Do you still expect me to marry you in the future? Your innate soul power is only half level, but I am naturally full of soul power. Your martial soul is just an abandoned martial soul. My martial soul is the strongest auxiliary weapon martial soul in the mainland, and it has also been advanced. We are not people from the same world at all. Seeing Lin Yi continue to applaud, as if he was happy for himself, Ning Rongrong's mood became even worse. When someone thinks about themselves in the future, they will say, "Look, that's the young master of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect. I heard her fiancé's innate soul power is only half level, and her martial soul is still a useless martial soul." She gritted her teeth and spoke in front of everyone present. "Father, I have always felt that Lin Yi and I are not suitable. We are not from the same world, and from beginning to end, I only treated him as a friend. If possible, let's cancel our engagement." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Crazy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Crazy. Let's cancel our engagement. As soon as Ning Rongrong finished speaking, the once bustling square suddenly fell silent. In fact, after the awakening of the martial soul, whether it is the direct disciples, collateral disciples, or disciples of the affiliated sects of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, they all know one thing very well. The engagement between Ning Rongrong and Lin Yi cannot be fulfilled no matter what. Lin Yi's innate soul power and useless martial soul determine that he can only become an ordinary person in this lifetime. Even if Sword Douluo is willing to pile up resources for him at no cost, he can only become a great soul master at most in his 20s. It is almost impossible for him to break through the Soul Lord. For the talented disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, Soul Master is almost a matter of having hands, and their goal is to become the Soul King and Soul Emperor. If Ning Rongrong were just an ordinary person, for the sake of Jian Douluo's face, perhaps Lord Ning would still keep her engagement with Lin Yi. But now Ning Rongrong has shown such terrifying talent, almost the most talented person in the Seven Treasures Glass Sect's decades. This engagement is impossible to continue even with your butt. But Ning Rongrong would choose such a decisive, and reckless way to cancel the engagement in front of everyone, which still surprised everyone. Some people support this decision and believe that Lin Yi, a useless person, is not worthy of Miss Ning Rongrong. Others oppose it. Before Lin Yi's martial soul awakened, why didn't you see Ning Rongrong withdraw? Now that the martial soul has just awakened, it's just like this. It's too fast to change sides, isn't it? More people, on the other hand, carefully looked in the direction of Sword Douluo on the stands, feeling a cold sweat rising from behind, afraid that the mainland's first attack Douluo would turn a blind eye. In the corner, Lin Yi, who was originally happy for Ning Rongrong, was stunned upon hearing these words. Isn't this engagement requested by Ning Rongrong? He remembered very clearly that Ning Rongrong had been clinging to him all day, shouting everywhere that he would marry Lin Yi when he grew up. Later, Lord Ning took advantage of a gathering to discuss this matter with Sword Douluo. The person who really wanted to refuse this engagement was actually him. After all, in his eyes, Ning Rongrong is just a little girl. The girl's mind is constantly changing, and maybe she won't like him when she grows up. Moreover, for a traveler, arranged marriage is not advisable. Ning Rongrong, this girl, if you don't follow her advice, she is really crying. For a long time, the Seven Treasures Glass Sect heard the screams of Ning Rongrong everywhere. In order to force Lin Yi to get engaged to her, she even started a hunger strike. Although each hunger strike could only last for a while, Lin Yi couldn't stand her making such a fuss. Coupled with the demeanor of the two elders, he could only reluctantly agree. But in order to prevent future changes, Lin Yi had already made an agreement with Lord Ning in advance. In case Ning Rongrong's mind changed in the future, he could terminate this engagement at any time and give her freedom. Why? Lin Yi looked at Ning Rongrong on stage with an incredulous expression, feeling that the girl she thought she was familiar with now seemed so unfamiliar. He really can't understand. If Ning Rongrong has any objections to this engagement, he can definitely discuss it with him privately. He won't refuse, let alone cling to the other person with a shameless expression. More importantly, this engagement was made by Sword Douluo. In his past life, Lin Yi was originally an orphan who longed for the warmth of his family. In this life, after arriving in the Douluo continent, he felt the long-awaited feeling on Douluo, even treating him like his own grandfather. Ning Rongrong's direct escalation of the situation to an irreparable extent is not just a face of swordsmanship. From childhood to adulthood, no matter how stubborn Ning Rongrong was, how he caused trouble, or how he played tricks on him, Lin Yi never got angry, but today, looking at Ning Rongrong's current appearance, a strong anger suddenly surged in Lin Yi's heart. On the stands. When Ning Rongrong said these words, Ning Fengji's forever smiling face suddenly became a bit stiff. He claims to have no last resort and thinks he has already arranged everything. But who would have thought that he still missed one thing? That's the personality of my daughter. Ah! Ning Fengji sighed in his heart. In fact, he had long had the idea of getting Ning Rongrong and Lin Yi to divorce, because he knew the result of Lin Yi and Ning Rongrong's future awakening of martial souls. In fact, fundamentally, he believes that Ning Rongrong did the right thing. But the timing was wrong. The Seven Treasures Glass Sect is the upper three sect and enjoys a reputation throughout the Douluo continent. The young master of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect chose to withdraw from his marriage when his fiancée had just awakened his useless martial soul and innate half-level soul power. How will people from other factions view her? Moreover, Lin Yi is currently at the lowest point in his life, and Sword Douluo is also in the worst mood today. If you make such a scene at this time, wouldn't that add fuel to the fire? Why can't we just wait for a while? Anyway, you two are still young, and there are still more than 10 years before we get married. Lin Yi and Douluo are not unreasonable people. When they calm down and realize that Lin Yi's talent is not worthy of Ning Rongrong, they will find an opportunity to voluntarily withdraw from their marriage. At that time, they can only give Lin Yi some compensation. Douluo is the most important person. Good, good. Douluo laughed angrily as he listened to Ning Rongrong's words. Master Ning, you have really taught a good daughter. Ning Fengji did not answer the conversation. After all, this matter is Ning Rongrong's fault. Moreover, he actually owes Lin Yi a debt. Douluo was also a bit awkward beside him. He felt like an outsider, watching Douluo and Lord Ning play riddles there. Father. Looking at his father not answering, Ning Rongrong on the stand suddenly became a little anxious. The words she just said were not actually the result of careful consideration, but a momentary impulse. Originally, she actually had a good impression of Lin Yi, and even fantasized at some moments that Lin Yi would become her guardian, even the Prince Charming. In the future. After all, Lin Yi is a useless martial soul, and his innate soul power is only half-level. What can he do with such a talent in the future? Do you embarrass yourself? Thinking of being bound to such a useless person, all members of aristocratic families and sects would treat him as a joke. Ning Rongrong felt that such a future was somewhat hopeless and suffocating. Therefore, she decided to say this in public when she had just awakened the 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda, fearing that her father would not be able to withstand the pressure of Sword Douluo and force her to marry Lin Yi. To Ning Rongrong's disappointment, Ning Fengji still remained silent. Let the children handle the matters between the children, Douluo suddenly spoke up. Why don't we listen to Lin Yi's opinion? If he also wants to give up this engagement, both parties don't like each other and it's just a good time to break up. But if he doesn't have the idea of giving up this engagement, since it's an agreement, we can't break it at will. At first glance, his words may sound like a reasonable guess, but upon closer examination, it is very obvious that he deviates. Several elders of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect's face instantly darkened. According to your sincere words, isn't it that as long as your useless disciple doesn't want to, our young master will never be able to withdraw from marriage? But facing the notorious sword Douluo, who has a soul power of 96 levels and is known for his martial arts skills, these Soul Emperor Soul Saints, who assist in martial arts, naturally dare not pluck tiger whiskers in front of them. They can only look at Ning Fengji, hoping that he can stand up for his daughter and say a fair word. After all, Gu Douluo is also a top-notch soul power expert at level 95, and has the blessing of the world's top auxiliary soul master Ning Fengji. If we really want to fight, Jian Douluo may not be able to take advantage. To their disappointment, as soon as Ning Fengji opened his mouth and wanted to speak, Sword Douluo looked directly at Lin Yi, indicating something. Lin Yi, feel free to make a bold decision and follow your inner thoughts. If Lord Ning refuses, I will retrieve your original things for you. When speaking, Jian Douluo's tone was calm, but everyone could hear the killing aura in his words. Let me make a decision. Can you help me retrieve my original belongings? Suddenly involved in a dispute over the title of Douluo, a hint of confusion appeared on Lin Ye's face. In fact, he also felt strange. Why was everyone present surprised when his soul power was only half level? Only the expression on Lord Ning's face was extremely calm, as if he had anticipated it earlier. Grandpa Jian Douluo, on the other hand, is no longer as gentle and kind as before, and has become aggressive. No way, how can Lin Yi make a decision? He must rely on me. Ning Rongrong exclaimed anxiously when he saw his father not standing on his side, but before she could finish speaking, Ning Fengji's tone suddenly became extremely stern. Shut up. I've really gotten used to you being too stubborn. After today, I'll punish you for 3 months imprisonment. Within 3 months, you're not allowed to go anywhere. Me. Ning Rongrong was extremely aggrieved, tears were almost streaming down her face. The core disciples of the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect, as well as the disciples of the affiliated sects around them, were originally sympathetic to Lin Ye's plight. However, upon seeing this behind the scenes, they all became angry and looked at Sword Douluo in solidarity. Why? That Lin Yi is not worthy of the young master. Even if the timing and way of speaking were problematic, the young master did not make a mistake in her decision to divorce. If relying on one's own strong military force, one can force the young master to marry a useless person. Does the Seven Treasures Glass Sect still have dignity? The irritable soul master wanted to speak up and support Ning Rongrong. In the next moment, the sword Douluo's body dissipated countless icy sword energies. The sharp waves cut through the entire field, and everyone could even feel the cold light brushing over their necks. Gudong. Someone rolled their Adam's apple and swallowed a mouthful of foam. Some people feel that their sweat and hair all over their bodies stand up in an instant. Some people are too grand to breathe, shrinking like quails, always bowing their heads, and even afraid to look at Sword Douluo again. Lin Yi, speak up. Sword Douluo glanced deeply at Lin Yi, his eyes filled with guilt. I think. In fact, Lin Yi doesn't know why a good martial soul awakening has evolved into what it is now. But he knows that now he is the core of solving the problem. Although Sword Douluo is currently dominating the entire arena and appears to be incredibly powerful, the heritage of the 3 schools of the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect is not just a name for itself. Not to mention those hidden experts, just Ning Fengji alone can double the combat power of Gu Douluo. If there is any conflict, Grandpa Jian Douluo will probably suffer a big loss. At the moment Lin Yi spoke, tears welled up in the corners of Ning Rongrong's eyes. In fact, when she withdrew, she didn't dislike Lin Yi as much. She simply despised his poor martial soul and talent, and didn't want to be with him. But after all this, her attitude towards Lin Yi has turned into a deep hatred. The people of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect present also lowered their heads and looked humiliated. No one thinks that Lin Yi would choose to give up this engagement. After all, his future as a soul master has been ruined, and he will definitely only be an ordinary person in the future. And Ning Rongrong, who is now the confirmed future leader of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, is very likely to become the first auxiliary female soul master in the mainland, and even the existence of the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland. By maintaining a marriage contract with Ning Rongrong, he will have endless wealth and status, a beautiful wife who will be a stunning beauty in the future, as well as extremely high status and influence. Will anyone be willing to give up on these? But the next moment, Lin Ye's words stunned everyone in the room. I think it's better to have a romantic relationship when it comes to engagement. Since Rongrong doesn't like me, there's no need for me to force it. Let's just pretend that this paper engagement never existed. A very simple paragraph, but it struck everyone's hearts like thunder. Ning Rongrong, Gu Douluo, Jian Douluo, and Ning Fengji were all stunned. The onlookers also had an idea in their minds at the same time. Lin Yi, is he crazy? End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Your martial soul, not a disused martial soul. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Your martial soul, not a disused martial soul. Does he know what he gave up on? Countless core disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect have red eyes. At this moment, they wished they could just kick Lin Yi open and replace him. Who is Ning Rongrong? She is the daughter of the sect leader Ning Fengji, born with full soul power and possessing the martial soul of the 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda. She is also a rare beauty embryo. How could you choose to give up on such a fiancé AE in front of you? But there were also some older elders who couldn't help but nod to themselves when they heard Lin Ye's words. This kid still knows how to handle things properly, knowing that he is not worthy of Miss Ning Rongrong. He chose to give up such a great wealth and avoid the rupture between Sword Douluo and Seven Treasure Glass Sect. He actually chose to cancel his engagement. Originally, Ning Rongrong was already crying profusely on stage, like a flower cat. She felt that her life was over and that she was forced by Sword Douluo to marry someone she neither liked nor had a future for. But when Lin Yi really agreed to her request to cancel the engagement, Ning Rongrong suddenly felt a sense of disappointment in his heart. But soon, this sense of loss was forcefully suppressed by her, replaced by a strong sense of confusion and embarrassment. Why? Why did he choose to cancel the engagement? Don't I have any attraction in his heart? On the stands, Ning Fengji heard Lin Ye's words and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Sword Douluo is extremely important to the Seven Treasures Liuli sect and is currently the strongest in the sect. Moreover, his martial soul 7-kill sword has extremely strong attacking power. Even if he teamed up with Bone Douluo, he is not confident in defeating the opponent. And even if someone wins, the ultimate result will definitely be a disastrous victory, which will be a major disaster for the Seven Treasures Glass Sect. Now, Lin Yesher's decision to give up his engagement is undoubtedly the best outcome. Gu Douluo on the side also breathed a sigh of relief. He has been friends with Sword Douluo Qinshin for many years, but he is absolutely loyal to the sect leader Ning Fengji. Now that they are in conflict, neither side of Sword Douluo is human. Lin Yi, you need to think carefully, Jian Douluo frowned slightly. If you're worried about me, there's no need to worry. I have my own confidence in my actions. I've already figured it out, Lin Yi smiled and shook her head. In fact, Jian Douluo had a good idea. He was indeed a bit worried, afraid that someone who was genuinely good to him would be hurt. On the other hand, he really doesn't like Ning Rongrong either. If in the past, he still had a good impression of Ning Rongrong and his sister, after this incident happened, he no longer cared about her at all. Okay, since neither of you wants this engagement, let's just assume that this incident hasn't happened, Ning Fengji said in a gentle tone. Then, he looked up at the stage. Ning Rongrong had just cried a while ago, with a pitiful expression of pear blossoms and rain, which was particularly heartbreaking. Ning Rongrong awakened the martial soul of the 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda, breaking the shackles of our 7 Treasures Glass Sect for thousands of years. This is a great achievement, and I will write it down for future rewards. But the merits and demerits are not equal. You caused chaos in public during the martial soul awakening ceremony, which was wrong. I will punish you for 3 months imprisonment. Do you have any objections? Ning Rongrong lifted his sleeves and wiped away the tears on his face. She knew that this was already the best outcome, and she successfully terminated the engagement without paying too much price, only needing to be banned for 3 months. For some unknown reason, she felt her heart pumping, as if she had done something wrong and lost an extremely precious thing. I have no objection. Lin Yi. Ning Fengji looked to the other side again. Although you have a low innate soul power and an ordinary martial soul, considering your loyalty to the 7 Treasure Glass Sect and your calm nature, are you willing to take charge of managing the 7 Treasure Glass Sect's industry in Kendo City? As soon as Ning Fengji spoke these words, whether it was the core disciples of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect or the disciples of other surnames, their eyes turned red again. They really can't figure it out. Why did all the good things catch up with Lin Yi? You should know that Kendo City is an imperial city and a major rear area that the 7 Treasures Liuli sect has been working hard to manage for many years. The industry there cannot be described by the daily progress of gold. Thank you very much, Lord Ning. Faced with such temptation, Lin Ye's face remained calm. I'm afraid I'm too inexperienced to take on such a heavy responsibility. The reason why he is willing to stay in the 7 Treasures Glass Sect is not because it is the upper 3 sect, but because he feels at home here. Now, this feeling is completely gone, and as an outsider, continuing to stay here is meaningless. Alas, Ning Fengji sighed in his heart. Actually, he is also very attractive to Lin Yi. Lin Yi is intelligent, calm, and possesses a calmness far superior to his peers, which can perfectly compensate for Rongrong's impatience and impulsiveness. There is a dilemma in the world. Master Ning. Sword Douluo arched his hand. I have been guarding the 7 Treasures Glass Sect for so many years, and my body has suffered serious injuries. Now that I am old, my body cannot bear it anymore. I earnestly request the sect leader to let me go home and take care of myself. If Lin Yi had just rejected him, Ning Fengji just felt a bit regretful. Now, as soon as Jian Douluo's words came out, his face suddenly became extremely ugly. Title Douluo, can't you bear it? These 2 words are linked together and can only be described as funny. Even an idiot can tell that after this incident, Sword Douluo is no longer willing to serve himself. Do you want to consider it again, Qinshin? Gu Douluo beside him couldn't help but persuade. In this continent, even the title Douluo requires the protection of the organization, because no matter how strong a person is, they cannot solve everything. As the top 3 sects, the 7 Treasures Glass Sect has a huge influence and strong financial resources, and Ning Fengji, the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland, can be said to be the best place to go. I have more heart but less strength, said Sword Douluo Chen with a blank expression on his heart. Upon hearing this sentence, Ning Fengji was also aware that Jian Douluo had already made up his mind to leave, and he could no longer keep the other party. He could only try to carefully consider his words and try to establish a good relationship. That's not as good as this. Qinshin worships you and you no longer need to serve my 7 Treasures Glass Sect. However, you still enjoy the same worship treatment as before. Every year, there will be dedicated people giving you cultivation resources, heavenly and earthly treasures, and soul coins. I said it. Jian Douluo frowned. When I used to get along with Ning Fengji, I thought he was a humble gentleman and very comfortable to get along with. However, as long as I disliked someone, everything that person did was wrong. Upon hearing Ning Fengji compete there, Sword Douluo felt restless. He was about to refuse when suddenly he thought of Lin Yi. I am not lacking in cultivation resources, but what about Lin Yi? If he wants to take that path in the future, he will need a huge amount of cultivation resources. Thinking of this, Jian Douluo forced a smile on his face and bowed. Then thank Lord Ning a lot. Where? Ning Fengji quickly returned the gift. He looked at the way Sword Douluo treated him with utmost respect, and let out a deep sigh in his heart. He knew that his relationship with Sword Douluo could never be restored to its previous state. But, thinking of Ning Rongrong's 8 treasure glass pagoda and the possibility of her advancing to the 9 treasure glass pagoda in the future, Ning Fengji remained firm in his inner thoughts. All of this is worth it. Soon, the martial soul awakening ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed. When leaving, the expressions on the faces of each person who comes to awaken their martial soul are quite complex. Apart from the unexpected outcome of the awakening of the martial soul, they were also shocked by what happened during the awakening ceremony. Although the elders of the 7 Treasures Glass sect strictly prohibit their disciples from spreading this matter, there is no airtight wall in the world. It can be expected that the conflict between Sword Douluo and Lord Ning will soon spread to all the top forces on the Douluo continent. Grandpa Jian, I'm sorry. In a secluded corner, Lin Yi looked at the friendly Sword Douluo Qinshin in front of him and lowered his head with some guilt. I have disappointed you. Looking at his sensible appearance, Jian Douluo's sense of guilt grew stronger in his heart. I should have disappointed you. Why did you say that? Lin Yi asked curiously. You looked forward to me so much, but I only awakened one useless martial soul, and my innate soul power was only half level. In fact, his intuition had already vaguely sensed something was wrong. Even if Ning Rongrong's behavior is a bit excessive and directly escalates the conflict to an almost irreparable level, with Grandpa Jian's usual style of behavior, he wouldn't just put the conflict with Lord Ning on the table like this. You actually guessed it vaguely. Jian Douluo raised his hand and gently stroked Lin Ye's soft hair. Guess what? Ning Rongrong's innate full soul power should have been yours. And your martial soul is not as useless as you think. On the contrary, your martial soul is the most top-notch martial soul in the entire continent, even in this world. It is only because your innate soul power has been plundered by others that its power does not show, and it looks like an ordinary useless martial soul. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Peak of Kendo. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Peak of Kendo. My martial soul, isn't it a useless martial soul? If the person who said this is not Jian Douluo, the person who understands sword martial soul the most in the whole continent, Lin Yi must feel that that person is talking nonsense. From any perspective, his martial soul is just an ordinary iron sword, and it is also covered in rust. How can this type of weapon soul be used as a weapon to attack humans, as it doesn't feel very sturdy just by looking at it? However, at this point, Lin Yi had no time to pay attention to these things. He was focused on another matter. My innate soul power has been plundered by someone. What does this mean? And I already guessed. What did I guess? Looking at Lin Ye's puzzled gaze, Sword Douluo sighed. The 7 Treasures Glass sect has a secret technique that only the sect leader knows how to implement. The purpose of this secret technique is twofold. Firstly, it tests the innate soul power level of the soul master in advance, even if the soul master is not 6 years old. Secondly, it can plunder the innate soul power of one soul master. It helps another soul master improve their innate soul power level, and even advance their martial soul. However, there are also many restrictions on the use of this secret technique. In addition to requiring both the predator and the victim to be virgins and under 6 years old, the most important thing is that the victim must have innate full soul power, and the predator must also be a top-notch martial soul, otherwise they cannot withstand the impact of an innate full soul power owner. So, was I originally born with full soul power? My innate soul power was plundered by Ning Rongrong. That's why she is born with full soul power. The martial soul of the 7 Treasures Glass Pagoda also successfully advanced to the 8 Treasures Glass Pagoda. Lin Ye's voice was a bit dry, and her body shook. When he awakened his abandoned martial soul and half-level innate soul power, although he appeared calm on the surface, his heart was also magnificent. After all, there is no teenager who doesn't aspire to become a hero and a strong person. He fell into hell from the genius that everyone was looking forward to. Now, he knows again that it was the person he once trusted the most and treated her the best who had sent him to hell. To be precise, it's Ning Rongrong. Douluo looked into Lin Ye's eyes and felt even more guilty. But whether Ning Rongrong knew or not, I'm not sure. Yeah. Thinking of Ning Rongrong's face, which always had a gentle smile and was like a spring breeze, Lin Yi felt a little chilly in her heart. He had understood Douluo's words and knew what he had guessed. When he was a child, Ning Rongrong was not in good health and often fell ill. Ning Rongrong always asked Ning Rongrong and Lin Yi to stay together in the name of helping to bring joy. Every time they stayed, Ning Rongrong's body always improved quickly, and he would become much weaker in the following period of time. Later, Lin Yi secretly asked Sword Douluo once. Sword Douluo looked at him for a long time before spitting out a few words, "Your physique is special." Perhaps it is precisely because of this that Sword Douluo became so impotent today. When he became a waste and encountered such a situation again, he clashed directly with Lord Ning for the first time. "I'm sorry, I actually know about this," Douluo said with guilt. "Ning Rongrong told me that Ning Rongrong's body is too poor. If he didn't use the purest innate soul power to comb his body, he might not be able to withstand the impact of top-level martial souls like the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda. But I didn't expect him to do so excellently." "It's none of your business," Lin Yi shook his head. Many of the things he had been puzzled by in the past were all connected together at this moment, incredibly clear. "And I don't blame you either. Without you adopting me, I would have died in a corner of the Star Forest a long time ago." Lin Yi knew that he was picked up by Sword Douluo while hunting soul beasts in the Star Forest. His life was originally given to him, and without him, a child without any resistance would not be able to survive in the soul beast forest surrounded by wolves. So, can my martial soul and soul power be restored in the future? After hesitating for a long time, Lin Yi still asked this question. He is not someone who often brings himself into the perspective of a victim. He is more concerned about what to do in the future than poor himself or despicable others. What a great child! Upon hearing Lin Ye's words, Douluo's eyes were slightly moist, and he felt even more guilty. He felt that his past behavior was simply not human. "I picked up a child and didn't take good care of him. I let go of everything that belonged to him and was plundered by Ning Feng, the ambitious family, and gave it to my own daughter." Moreover, after spending so many years with Ning Rongrong, Sword Douluo had already understood his obsession, which was to advance to the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda and reach the level of 8 treasures and 9 treasures. With such a person in front of him and such an opportunity, how could he possibly stop at the right time? "I'm afraid not in Douluo continent." Douluo shook his head and looked at Lin Ye's dim gaze. He quickly added, "But it doesn't mean it's not in other places." "Other places?" Lin Yi was stunned. "Besides Douluo continent, there are other places. Can it be the divine realm? Did Grandpa Douluo become a god without telling us all? Do you still know about the divine realm?" Sword Douluo looked at Lin Yi with some surprise, but he didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked another question. "Lin Yi, do you believe there is another world besides Douluo continent? A strong person can create things in the void, devour the sun, and a blade of grass can cut through the world of the sun, moon, and stars." Before crossing to Douluo continent, Lin Yi was just a few-year-old little vagabond with no time or conditions to read online articles. However, thanks to the information explosion on Earth, his acceptance was still very high. Since there is a Earth that develops technological civilization and a Douluo continent that develops soul master civilization in the universe, why can't there be a world where strong people can pick stars and take the moon? "I believe it." Lin Yi replied without hesitation. Douluo originally thought he would have to spend some time explaining the world to Lin Yi, but when he accepted it without hesitation, a hint of a smile appeared on his face. "Your martial soul is an iron sword, also belonging to swordsmanship. Next, I'll take you to a place that truly belongs to the pinnacle of swordsmanship. Meanwhile, the events that occurred during the awakening ceremony of the Seven Treasure Glass Sect's martial soul are also constantly spreading to various forces. In fact, among the top forces, except for those like Haotian's sect who remain closed doors, others cannot find the hidden world sect outside the mountain gate, and they basically plant spies in each other. This has even become a hidden rule among various major aristocratic families. But after all, the Seven Treasures Glass Sect has a strong influence and cannot allow others to infiltrate. Only top-notch forces such as the Martial Soul Hall and the Blue Electric Tyrannosaurus Rex family can evade their layers of screening and infiltrate spies. Martial Soul City, Papal Hall, inside the Papal Hall. A woman with a short stature, dressed in a bright golden long dress and a perfect appearance, exuding a noble and elegant temperament all over her body, is sitting on the papal chair, watching the secret report sent by special means. Has Ning Rongrong, the leader of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, clashed with Sword Douluo? Does Sword Douluo choose to retire and return home? At the moment of seeing the news, Bibidong's eyes froze. Is the source of the message reliable? As the Pope of the Martial Soul Hall, she is always ready to engage in battles with various forces. Perhaps this is a play played by the Seven Treasures Glass Sect to attract those with intentions to come out. It must be reliable, and the people who deliver the message are all the highest-level hidden warriors in our Martial Soul Hall, said a man who was bowing in his black robe, quickly. His soul power fluctuated strongly all over his body, giving him an eerie and chilling feeling from a distance. However, when faced with Bibidong, the most powerful woman on this continent, he could only lie on the ground and dare not even lift his head. You go down, Bibidong waved his hand casually, gesturing for the person to step back. Yes. When she was left alone in the vast papal hall, a faint smile appeared on her stunning face. The Seven Treasures Glass Sect has always been a major concern for the Martial Soul Hall. With these auxiliary soul masters that can play a huge role on the battlefield, the Martial Soul Hall will inevitably encounter tremendous resistance in order to unify the continent in the future. Kekabeo Liuli sect not only has Ning Rongrong, the first auxiliary soul master in the mainland who can double the strength of the title Douluo, but also two title Douluo. More importantly, among the two title Douluo, there is one sword Douluo with a level of 96, who is known as the number one killer. It is still unknown how terrifying the combined combat power of Ning Rongrong and Sword Douluo is compared to that of Bibidong. But what she can be certain of is that even if the two title Douluo, Ju Douluo and Gue Douluo, combined, are not necessarily opponents of these two. Now, Ning Rongrong and Sword Douluo have turned against each other, and the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect only has Bone Douluo as the title Douluo sitting. Compared to Bibidong, this is truly great news. She even felt a bit regretful. If it weren't for not being ready for war yet, Bibidong would have wanted to launch the soul hunting plan directly and eliminate the hidden danger of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect. However, what exactly happened between Sword Douluo and Ning Rongrong? Their relationship has always been close, hasn't it? After governing the Martial Soul Hall for so many years, Bibidong not only has strong strength, but also has developed a good habit of being cautious. She squinted her eyes and carefully examined the confidential report, quickly discovering clues. Liuli, the disciple of Sword Douluo, awakened an abandoned martial soul with only half-level innate soul power. However, Ning Rongrong, the daughter of Ning Rongrong, had innate full soul power and even broke through the limitations of the seven-layer glass tower, awakening the martial soul of the Eight Treasures Glass Tower. When he saw this, Bibidong raised his eyebrows and a murderous intent flashed through his eyes. The existence of Ning Rongrong has caused great trouble for the plan of unifying the continent in the Martial Soul Hall, and now there is a more talented Ning Rongrong, never let her grow up. However, Bibidong is also very clear that after the Martial Soul Awakening ceremony, the Seven Treasures Glass Sect will definitely regard Ning Rongrong as a rare treasure, protecting her from all angles and not giving anyone a chance to take action. We need to endure for some time. The killing intent in Bibidong's eyes gradually dissipated and returned to his former dignified and noble image as the Pope. She continued to contemplate the matter. Is it difficult that the psychological gap between Sword Douluo is too large? That's why there was a conflict with Ning Rongrong. This idea just emerged and was directly ruled out by Bibidong. Over the years, the Martial Soul Hall has also attempted to recruit Sword Douluo multiple times, but no matter what conditions they offer, the other party remains unmoved. Moreover, Bibidong's experience with Sword Douluo has made her very clear that Sword Douluo is definitely not such a shallow person. Why is that? Bibidong repeatedly flipped through this confidential report. There are many undercover agents stationed in the Martial Soul Hall of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, and each person has written a report of the situation from their own perspective. This is because everyone has a different perspective on things. Even the most professional warrior will have a dead end in their thinking. Finally, when he saw a secret report that said, Sword Douluo looked at Lin Yi with a look of guilt, Bibidong suddenly became enlightened and finally understood the reason behind the matter. Is it the glass method? The glass technique originally did not belong to the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, but rather to another rare auxiliary martial soul family, the Nine Hearts Begonia Leaf family. Like the Seven Treasures Glass Pagoda, the Nine-Hearted Begonia is also an extremely rare auxiliary martial soul. No matter how many soul rings it has, there is only one soul skill, which is the scope of all healing. What's even more magical is that the Nine-Hearted Begonia can only have two soul masters at the same time. Only when the previous generation dies will a new Nine-Hearted Begonia soul owner be born. But it is precisely because of this that the power of the Nine-Hearted Begonia family is very weak and often coveted by some malicious families. Decades ago, in order to obtain blessings, the previous head of the Nine-Hearted Begonia family, Yi Tiansheng, voluntarily offered the family's secret techniques to the Seven Treasures of the Glass Sect. It was only after that the Yi family continued to survive peacefully. That secret method was also renamed Liuli method by the Seven Treasures Liuli sect. Pope Qiang Sunji, who served as the new pope of the Martial Soul Hall, was also interested in this secret technique, but when he understood the specific effects and casting conditions of this secret technique, he became disinterested. Because the conditions for implementing this secret technique are too strict, it must find a child who is naturally full of soul power as the top of the furnace for being plundered of innate soul power, and another child with top-level martial soul as the beneficiary. Two people must be intimate and require a very long time. Not to mention the mainland for so many years, there are only a few children with innate soul power who can awaken top-level martial souls. Who would have a lower innate soul power level? Although the returns are large, the risks are not small, and the conditions for achieving them are strict. Therefore, this secret technique was naturally abandoned by the Martial Soul Hall. So, did Ning Rongrong's innate full soul power come from that Lin Yi? Bibidong thought to himself. Although she held a high position and had long been accustomed to the evil of human nature, for some reason, during this period, Bibidong's maternal nature was particularly strong. Thinking of a child who was originally born with full soul power and top-notch martial soul, being plundered and reduced to waste, a hint of heartache appeared on her exquisite and beautiful face. Then, Bibidong began to browse through a document related to Lin Yi, from birth to the awakening of his martial soul. This document was not long, but extremely detailed. When Lin Yi was born, he once triggered the sound of Sword Douluo's sword. Sword Douluo greatly appreciated his talent and even agreed to fight with Lin Yi in the future when he became a titled Douluo. Bibidong nodded to himself. She actually guessed that Lin Yi's original martial soul would be the most top-notch sword-type martial soul, similar to the seven-kill sword, otherwise it would not be able to support the innate full soul power. Lin Yi has a calm personality and is mature at a young age. When she is with Ning Rongrong, she often takes care of her. Ning Rongrong is also happy to see her daughter spend time with Lin Yi, and with Jian Douluo, they have made a marriage agreement between Lin Yi and Ning Rongrong. This paper engagement is probably just to stabilize Sword Douluo and buy time for plundering Lin Ye's talent. A hint of sarcasm appeared at the corner of Bibidong's mouth. This Ning Fengji, the pattern is too small. After calculation, it's just these petty things. There are some extremely trivial things recorded later on. For example, Lin Yi was clearly exhausted and had to be glued by Ning Rongrong to tell her various stories. For example, when Ning Rongrong caused trouble, Lin Yi took responsibility for her, but Ning Fengji did not punish Lin Yi. Ning Rongrong felt that his father was unfair, treating Lin Ye's brother too well and himself too badly. For example, Ning Rongrong promotes everywhere that when he grows up, he will marry Lin Ye's brother, but Bibidong took it very seriously. The image of a boy with a strong and steady personality, who is far more mature than her peers, is slowly outlined in her mind. If Bibidong knows everything that happens afterwards, there is no need to look at it again. She let out a faint sigh. To be fair, she hopes that Lin Yi can live well, at least better than Ning Rongrong, so as to make her chest, which is a bit congested at the moment, feel a little relieved. But reason also made Bibidong very clear that if nothing happened, Ning Rongrong and the evil Ning Fengji would live very well. And Lin Yi can only be an ordinary person or a low-level soul master in this lifetime. No one knows what happened to him, and no one remembers his name. Someone, Bibidong suddenly spoke up. Under the Pope's crown, figures dressed in black quietly emerged, their bodies surrounded by intense soul power fluctuations. Go investigate the traces of Sword Douluo, and if you can meet him, send him a message saying that he can use the heavenly and earthly treasures of the Martial Soul Hall. If he is willing to come to our Martial Soul Hall for worship, that Lin Yi, the Martial Soul Hall can give him the position of the Holy Sun to protect his lifelong wealth and prosperity. The amount of information contained in this sentence is too great, making all the figures wearing black clothes pale. The Holy Sun of the Martial Soul Hall, that's a position that countless people are trying to compete for with their heads broken. Not to mention the resources accumulated by the Martial Soul Hall over the years. After all these people left, Bibidong lazily leaned back on the papal chair, her luxurious papal robe outlining her plump and graceful curves. Her decision was not impulsive, but carefully considered. Although he sympathized with the child named Lin Yi, after being in a high position for so many years, Bibidong naturally couldn't act impulsively. She did this because she had already figured out the thoughts of Sword Douluo. Originally, Sword Douluo liked both his disciple Lin Yi and that Ning Rongrong. In order to recuperate Ning Rongrong's body, coupled with his disciple Lin Ye's engagement with Ning Rongrong, he tacitly agreed to Ning Fengji's behavior. But what he didn't expect was that Ning Fengji had done too much, pushing Ning Rongrong's talent to not only innate full soul power, but also recklessly using Lin Ye's innate soul power to help Ning Rongrong's martial soul advance. The 8 treasures glass pagoda has been completed. Lin Yi has also become a waste. At this moment, he still maintains some restraint. After all, Ning Fengji is a person he greatly respects, and Ning Rongrong is still Lin Ye's fiancée AE. If he really tears his face, it will be bad for everyone. But at this moment, Ning Rongrong, in front of everyone, directly terminated his engagement with Lin Yi in the most extreme way possible. Sword Douluo is crazy. You should know that the most important thing in Kendo is to have a clear sword heart. After this series of things, how much will Douluo owe to that child named Lin Yi in his heart? He can't help but want to slap himself when he thinks about it in the middle of the night. Therefore, Bibidong's means of attracting Sword Douluo are not power status or cultivation resources, but heavenly materials and earthly treasures that can help Lin Yi repair his injured foundation, as well as the Holy Sun of the Martial Soul Hall that can protect Lin Ye's wealth and prosperity for a lifetime. Ning Fengji, you calculated everything and didn't take into account your daughter. Would you suddenly have such a big show for you? Bibidong's lips slightly curved. Even if she cannot win over Sword Douluo, as long as Sword Douluo does not contribute to the 7 treasures glass sect, everything she has done is worth it. It's just a pity that child. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. A grass slashes all the sun, moon, and stars. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. A grass slashes all the sun, moon, and stars. The same thing is happening in other major forces as well. The blue electric Tyrannosaurus Rex of the upper three schools, the white tiger, wind sword, elephant armor, fire leopard of the lower four schools, and the imperial family of the Kendo star Luo Empire. After learning that Sword Douluo had separated from the Seven Treasures Glass Sect, almost every ambitious force began to send people everywhere to search for the traces of Sword Douluo. A level 97 title Douluo is a terrifying presence capable of determining the situation on the mainland. Of course, not to mention the four sects, even terrifying sects like the blue electric Tyrannosaurus Rex cannot afford to support another 96 level title Douluo. The reason they do this is just to show their attitude and form a good relationship. Apart from the closed mountain gate and the hidden Haotian sect, there are actually only three forces on this continent who are truly qualified to participate in recruiting Sword Douluo. Martial Soul Hall, Heavenly Do Royal Family, Star Luo Royal Family. Under the major actions of these top forces, even the smaller Soul Master families and Soul Master sects were aware of this news. At the same time, the name Liuli quietly spread and became one of the people on this continent who must not be offended. Although his soul power is low, his martial soul is useless and he is only a child. But behind him stands a title Douluo. 3 days later, at the core of the Star Forest, there was a deep and dense forest. Two people, one old and one young, stepped into this rarely visited place. The deeper you go inside, the more dense the forest becomes, blocking out the sky and sun. However, as you walk, you come to a place that feels like a dead end. There are no plants, no animals, no sound, as if all vitality has been stripped away, completely like two worlds from the outside. What's here? Liuli looked around curiously. It was his first time visiting the Soul Beast Forest, and it was also his first time seeing such a strange sight. This was originally a territory belonging to a 60,000-year-old soul beast. Jian Douluo looked at the scene before him with a somewhat nostalgic expression. 60,000 years of soul beasts. Liuli was startled. Although he has never been to the Soul Beast Forest, he has also seen captive soul beasts in the Seven Treasures Glass Sect. These soul beasts are incredibly large in size and possess various eerie powers, often possessing stronger combat power than soul masters of the same level. Even the disciples of the Seven Treasures Glass Sect and its affiliated sects are already the elites among the elite. Faced with soul beasts that have been domesticated for many years and their combat effectiveness is not as good as in the wild, they often suffer heavy injuries. What is the concept of a 60,000-year soul beast? I'm afraid even Contra is not a match. But he also noticed the profound meaning in Sword Douluo's words. What about now? Now. Sword Douluo smiled, I'm afraid it won't dare to go back to this place in its lifetime. Seemingly worried about Lin Ye's misunderstanding, he spoke again. It's not because of me, but because of it. Speaking, Sword Douluo reached out and pointed towards a corner ahead. Liuli looked in the direction pointed by Sword Douluo. But I didn't notice anything, only saw a blade of grass. That is an ordinary-looking sword grass, growing in a quiet dead land. If it hadn't appeared here, it would probably have grown on the roadside and no one would have glanced at it. For some unknown reason, when Liuli saw the sword grass, he suddenly felt an impulse surge in his body. His martial soul rusted sword is now desperately trying to surface. Is this? Liuli hesitated, wanting to summon his martial soul. Sword Douluo looked at him with both satisfaction and some regret. It seems that your martial soul is even stronger than I thought. In this situation, you can still control it. When I first came here, I couldn't control the 7-kill sword at all. It almost instinctively appeared and surrendered to that sword grass. So, what exactly is that? Liuli was even more surprised. 7-kill sword, on the Douluo continent, is the most top-notch sword-type martial soul. Is it just a blade of grass that even the 7 kill swords want to submit to? It's just an ordinary sword grass. Douluo looked up at the sky, as if recalling the scene from the beginning. However, what's not ordinary is that it was once picked up by a peerless powerhouse and slashed out a peerless sword energy. At this point, Sword Douluo's voice trembled slightly, with a tone of admiration, awe, and even a hint of fear. Do you believe that someone can annihilate the sun, moon, and stars with just one blade of grass? At that time, when I became a title Douluo, I thought I had reached the limit of this world. However, when I saw this grass, I was moved by its remaining spiritual imprints. As an observer, I saw the great battle of the shattered galaxy and the collapse of the Great Road. The great battle was in the starry sky, not far from our Douluo continent, and may not even be in the same time and space as us. However, the powerful swordsman who wielded that sword energy unexpectedly glanced at me from afar when I triggered the spiritual imprint, as if crossing the river of time, looking from the past to the future. After that time, I finally understood what it means to have people outside and heaven outside. Are you teasing me? If it weren't for Douluo's serious tone during his speech, Lin Yi would have thought he was joking with him. No, what you're saying must at least be something that can happen in a high martial arts fantasy world, right? This doesn't match the art style of Douluo continent. However, the trust established in Sword Douluo for a long time still made Lin Yi couldn't help but immerse himself in it and start thinking, so, can this sword grass help me restore my martial soul? Not bad. Douluo nodded. Although many years have passed, the peerless sword energy on this grass has not dissipated, otherwise the surrounding environment would not have been able to disappear like this. And most importantly, it was here that I found you back then. Beside you naked, there is this sword grass accompanying you. It's just that its sword energy is too powerful, I can't take it away at all. Why do you emphasize being naked? Who wore clothes when they were first born? Lin Yi said, roast in her heart, looking at the ordinary sword grass, which actually contains the amazing sword spirit. Suddenly she felt an impulse. Zheng. A loud sword roar. The rusty sword quietly emerged. Along the way, Sword Douluo's soul 7 kill sword suddenly appeared as if it had also been summoned. Zheng is another sword roar. Lin Ye's iron sword, in front of this sword grass that harbors the unparalleled sword energy, was unafraid and even eager to try, as if to compete with that sword energy. How could it be like this? Is it possible that, after all these years, there has been a new change in that sword aura? Sword Douluo hesitated for a moment. When facing this sword aura, his martial soul 7 kill sword had no resistance. Just as he thought it was time passing, the sword energy dissipated and the killing aura faded. He lowered his head again. His real name is Martial Soul, 7 kill sword. At this moment, he was already lying in front of the sword grass, trembling like a vassal submitting to the Emperor Sword Douluo. At this moment, the sword energy in the sword grass suddenly erupted, sharp and sharp, as if it could cut through everything in the world. The sword energy suddenly spread and swept in all directions. Not good. Sword Douluo was shocked. At the beginning, he had personally experienced the power of that sword energy, and even just a glance from a distance in the spiritual imprint helped him break through level 96 soul power and reach level 97. Now, how terrifying should the momentum generated by the spread of that sword aura be? Subconsciously, he stood in front of Lin Yi and forcefully forced the 7 kill sword, which had already become too afraid to fight. The 9 soul rings of yellow, yellow, purple, purple, black, black, and black suddenly lit up, ready to exert all his strength to protect Lin Yi. The sword energy seemed to be like seeing Husky, who had reunited with his master after a long separation, and with joy, it penetrated into Lin Yi's martial soul rust sword. Sword Douluo. No, it's not, you make me look foolish like this. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. 3 talented ones. Do I seem to still have a martial soul? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Three talented ones, do I seem to still have a martial soul? During the peak of that sword energy, it was an existence that could annihilate the stars in the universe. Even after countless years of wear and tear, it is still extremely powerful, and the most fundamental strand of sword intent remains indestructible. Like a spring breeze turning into rain, the sword intent penetrated into Lin Ye's body, helping him repair his body that had been ravaged by soul power to the point of being riddled with wounds and holes. Almost at a visible speed, the rust on the rusty sword began to dissipate, revealing its sharp edge. But for some reason, Lin Yi always felt that his martial soul rust sword had an extraordinary background. Even if he swallowed all the sword energy, he couldn't completely repair it. Is it an illusion? He felt a bit amused. According to Douluo's description, the origin of these sword energies is extremely terrifying. Even the gods in the divine realm may not be able to withstand a single sword energy. After all, gods do not have the ability to destroy stars at will. It's already good if one's martial soul can absorb these sword energies. After absorbing these sword energies, they cannot be repaired to their perfect form. Isn't that to say that one's martial soul level is even higher than that of gods? Wash and sleep, there's everything in your dreams. Douluo, who was standing beside him, watched the scene like this. Even though he was accustomed to the strong winds and waves and had a calm expression during the duel with the title Douluo, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva at this moment. He suddenly wanted to know, what kind of monster did I find back then? The rust cracked inch by inch, and the rusty sword silently emerged in the air, like a black hole, absorbing seemingly endless sword energy. But soon, the sword energy sensed something was wrong. If in this situation, it will be completely engulfed by this iron sword. Originally, this sword energy felt a breath from the same source, instinctively wanting to swallow the other person and continue to maintain its own existence. But the level of that rusty sword is even higher than it, and it cannot be assimilated. Instead, it will be completely devoured. I don't know what kind of unparalleled strength that sword energy comes from. Even a single sword energy has given birth to some spiritual intelligence, almost instinctively wanting to retreat. However, the attraction from the rusty sword is too strong. The sword energy directly divided half of oneself, like a strong warrior with a broken wrist. The remaining half of the sword energy wandered around for a moment, hesitating repeatedly between Sword Douluo and Lin Yi, seemingly choosing a host. After hesitating for a long time, the sword energy still chose to penetrate into Lin Ye's body. And that rusty sword, even if it engulfs all its sword energy, is not enough to sustain its evolution, let alone now it has only swallowed half. Rust quickly resurfaces, and that unparalleled sword with unparalleled sharpness has once again become a rusty sword. Did you fail? Douluo's face showed a regretful expression. If even this place cannot help Lin Yi, then there is probably no place on the mainland that can help Lin Yi. Lin Ye's expression was also somewhat dim. He thought he had hope just now. But soon, he felt his abnormality. Has my martial soul changed? Lin Yi lost his voice. He summoned his martial soul rusty sword, holding a solid hilt, and an extremely friendly feeling emerged. His soul power has been improved this time, reaching level 10 directly, and has become innate full soul power again. In fact, when one's soul power reaches level 10, that sword energy can continue to enhance one's soul power. It is not a problem to stack it up to level 20 or even higher, but the vast majority of its subsequent power is used to evolve one's martial soul. At first, the rusty sword looked ordinary and there was no special feeling when held in hand, but now, Lin Ye's mind had three more talents. Firstly, the ultimate master of swordsmanship. Any sword-type martial soul, when facing Lin Ye's rusty sword, as long as he is willing, can weaken the opponent's combat power by 90%. Secondly, immortality in immortality. Lin Ye's martial soul rust sword can endlessly enhance combat effectiveness. As long as you defeat a soul master, the power of the rust sword can increase. Meanwhile, Lin Yi will be immune to any mental attack damage. Thirdly, sword travel is 2 virtual Lin Ye's martial soul rust sword can transform into a spiritual state, enter and exit the underworld, and be used to transmit messages. After the rust sword reaches a certain level, it can be transformed together with the sword holder. This is. Lin Yi widened his eyes. It was the first time he had seen a martial soul with a passive talent. And these 3 talents of his are also a bit too incredible. Kendo Master can weaken his combat power by 90% when facing any sword-type martial soul. Sword Douluo is also a sword-type martial soul. Isn't it that he can also weaken Sword Douluo's strength? Of course, with the strength of Sword Douluo, even if it is weakened by 90%, it is far from what he can fight against. The second talent that never dies or dies is even more incredible. It is immune to mental attack damage, which is equivalent to those spiritual soul masters. When faced with it, it is like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. And the most terrifying thing is that the combat power of Rust Sword can be endlessly improved. So as long as he doesn't fall halfway, he can definitely become the strongest on the mainland. The third talent Lin Yi hasn't seen any use yet, but the first 2 talents have already surprised him. Because these 2 talents are not only incredibly strong, but also interconnected. If he wants to become stronger, he needs to defeat soul masters, but he can also be immune to mental attack damage and weaken the combat power of sword soul masters. If he chooses a card bug, can he easily become stronger by constantly challenging spiritual and sword soul masters in the same realm? How's it going? Jian Douluo asked anxiously. Lin Yi hesitated for a moment, and after saying that she had regained her natural full soul power, she also revealed her second talent, immortal and immortal, as well as her third talent, sword swift taishu. He trusts Sword Douluo very much, but the talent of swordsmanship master is too incredible. As long as it is exposed, he will be the enemy of sword martial soul masters in the world, and this talent is also related to Sword Douluo's interests. Although he does not think Sword Douluo will harm himself, there is no need to speak out. Anyway, he doesn't need this talent to damage Sword Douluo. Jian Douluo widened his eyes and felt that he had been shocked today, more than in the past few decades. Having innate full soul power is already enough to defy the heavens. Can there be an unlimited increase in martial souls? And it can also completely immune to the damage of a type of soul master. As for Lin Ye's second talent, it was overlooked by him. What is the use of using a sword to transmit messages? Are you going to be a scout? Spiritual soul masters are really unlucky. All soul masters were suppressed by a child. Jian Douluo chuckled inwardly and looked at Lin Yi with serious eyes. Your martial soul's talent is too terrifying, don't tell anyone. I know, Lin Yi nodded. It seems that Lin Yi is afraid of not knowing the severity, but Sword Douluo solemnly reminds him. As long as your passive skill that is immune to spiritual attacks is passed out, it will become the enemy of spiritual soul masters across the continent. They cannot allow their natural enemies to grow alive. And the feature of your martial soul's unlimited enhancement will attract countless people's envy. Some may want to bet on you, but more people will suppress or even assassinate you in various ways. You should know that without a growing genius, it's not even bullshit. Don't worry, Grandpa Jian Douluo, I know the right balance. Lin Yi nodded again. Good, good. Sword Douluo Lao Yen was very relieved, feeling extremely happy in his heart. Thinking of Ning Fengji's calculated appearance, a strong hint of irony appeared in his eyes. Ning Fengji, when Lin Yi reaches the peak of the mainland, I don't know what your thoughts will be. Will you regret it? Will you still regret it? At this moment, Lin Yi felt another abnormal fluctuation in her body. He suddenly remembered that the massive sword energy had only been swallowed by half of his martial soul rust sword, and half of the sword energy had penetrated directly into his body. Grandpa Jian, I feel like I still have a martial soul. Lin Yi suddenly spoke up. At this moment, Sword Douluo, like being struck by lightning, widened his eyes once again. What are you saying? End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Second Martial Soul, Void Swallows Flame. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, Second Martial Soul, Void Swallows Flame. Twin Martial Souls. A word suddenly came to Douluo's mind. He never expected that Lin Ye's talent could be so terrifying. Just a martial soul that can be immune to mental damage and increase combat power without limits, combined with innate full soul power, is enough to easily grow into a title Douluo, and it must be the most powerful type of combat power among title Douluo. Now, Lin Yi has actually created a twin martial soul for him again. Summon it up and give it a try. Sword Douluo quickly spoke up. At this moment, besides anticipation, he also has a strong curiosity. After all, even he had never really seen anyone with twin martial souls, he only saw descriptions about them in some ancient books. Okay, Lin Yi nodded. He gently raised his hand, trying to summon his second martial soul. Quickly, a gap silently opened in the void, and a deep, flickering black flame suddenly appeared. At the moment when this flame emerged, Lin Ye's first martial soul rust sword seemed to sense a threat and suddenly flickered, facing away from this flame. Seeing this scene, Lin Yi quickly put away his first martial soul rust sword, and at the same time, many understandings related to this flame came to mind. Void Swallowing Inflammation. This is the name of this flame. Unlike a rusty sword, it has only one characteristic. That's devouring. It can devour everything with energy in the world. Its favorite is various pure elements, followed by those heavenly and earthly treasures. As long as there is enough energy, it can also improve without limit. Your second martial soul is not easy either, said Sword Douluo with a serious gaze. Lin Ye's soul power has only recently recovered to its innate full soul power, and it can actually bring a sense of threat to his title Douluo. Moreover, Lin Ye's first martial soul rust sword is obviously of extraordinary origin and extremely high level, which can make that rust sword feel threatened. This black flame is obviously not an ordinary thing. Lin Yi also told Sword Douluo the name and characteristics of nihility swallowing inflammation, and Sword Douluo fell into silence again. Why, is it another martial soul that can be increased without limit? At this moment, he even had some doubts, whether Lin Yi was a human or a transformed soul beast of 100,000 years. No one's two martial souls are so twisted. However, upon careful consideration, even if it is 100,000 years of soul beast transformation, there cannot be such a twisted martial soul. Is Lin Yi the reincarnation of a deity in the divine realm? This seems to make sense. However, no matter what, Lin Yi grew up on his own, and after going through the affairs of the 7 treasures and glass sect, he was firmly on the same front as himself. Sword Douluo hardly considered it and began to help Lin Yi think about what he should do to grow quickly. There is usually only one way for an ordinary soul master to become stronger, which is to meditate and cultivate soul power. Kellanai has 2 fastest and highest growth methods. Winning a duel with a soul master can increase the combat power of the martial soul. Use his second martial soul, the Void Swallowing Flame, to devour various necessary items, pure energy, or heavenly and earthly treasures, and quickly increase the soul power level. I know where you're suitable to go, Sword Douluo said. Where? Lin Yi asked curiously. At this moment, he vaguely felt that his second martial soul seemed to have other effects. The 4 major elemental academies, Kamikaze, Blaze, Qianshui, and Thunder, have no greater mastery of elemental power on the mainland than in these few places. As he spoke, Sword Douluo felt somewhat regretful. If Lin Yi had known that he could awaken such a talent, he would not have broken with the 7 treasures and glass sect. With the wealth of the 7 treasures and glass sect, it would be beautiful to use the heavenly and earthly treasures in their treasure trove to nourish Lin Ye's martial soul. Although he is a title Douluo, he has always had many offerings over the years. However, rare things like heavenly materials and earthly treasures are often only possessed by those with extremely deep foundations. Sounds pretty good. Lin Yi blinked. His first martial soul rust sword needs to fight with a soul master to become stronger, while his second martial soul void swallowing flame needs to devour elements to become stronger. If he runs through all 4 elemental academies, wouldn't it be double the joy? But those are all advanced soul master academies. I'm only 6 years old. And my soul power is only at level 10 now, so I can't even meet the admission requirements. Lin Yi suddenly asked. Don't worry. Sword Douluo patted his chest, and his arrogance suddenly appeared. I'll show you how much influence a title Douluo can have in the Douluo continent. With his strength and status, not to mention arranging his disciples to enroll in the 4 Elements Academy, even if he rushes into the imperial families of the 2 major empires of the heavenly Do Star Luo and steals their princesses to become Lin Ye's child bride, as long as it is not too ostentatious and made known to everyone, the heavenly Do Star Luo royal family may only pretend that nothing has happened. Next, Sword Douluo needs to help Lin Yi find a suitable soul beast. After all, Lin Ye's soul power has reached level 10, and he needs to hunt soul beasts to obtain soul rings. Just as he was preparing to search for a soul beast with suitable attributes and years in the Star Forest, suddenly, an accident occurred. The sword grass that had been growing there suddenly turned into a stream of light for some reason and penetrated into Lin Ye's body. Gradually, a soul ring began to take shape. Sword Douluo. No, are you the protagonist, kid? What do you want? At the same time, within the 7 Treasures Glass Sect. Due to the departure of Sword Douluo, the atmosphere of the entire 7 Treasures Glass Sect became quite oppressive. You should know that originally there were only 2 title Douluo in the 7 Treasures Glass Sect, and now the strongest one has passed away. This makes auxiliary soul masters who already lack a sense of security even more uneasy. Ning Fengji also knew that this was the weakest time for the 7 Treasure Glass Sect, so he immediately announced the blockade of the mountain gate and strictly prohibited the entry and exit of all kinds of people. The 7 Treasure Glass Sect's industry in other places also immediately shrank, focusing on being able to bend and stretch. A quiet room. Ning Fengji looked at the report brought by his subordinates and his face twitched. These are all losses of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect in the past 2 days. Even though he was mentally prepared and knew it was a necessary sacrifice, when he saw the astronomical loss of the golden soul coin, he still felt blood dripping in his heart. How is Gu Douluo's side? Ning Fengji asked. Master, everything is normal, one subordinate immediately replied. That's good. Ning Fengji nodded, you can arrange it. The amount of Bone Douluo offerings will increase by another 20% this year. The 7 Treasures Glass Sect only has 2 title Douluo. Now that 1 Sword Douluo has left, only 1 Bone Douluo is left. As the sect becomes extremely weak, we must also guard against any thoughts that may arise from the Bone Douluo. After all, he is just an auxiliary soul master with Sword Douluo present. They can balance each other, but now the balance has been broken. If Bone Douluo has any thoughts, he will die without a place to bury himself. Ah! Ning Feng sighed as he watched his subordinates leave. Ning Rongrong did something beyond his expectations during the martial soul awakening ceremony, forcing Sword Douluo away and causing heavy losses to the sect. But if it were to happen again, he would still choose to do so without hesitation. Compared to a title Douluo and a so-called called genius, the shackles that countless generations of the 7 Treasures Glass Sect hope to break are the most important. Just wait for Rongrong to grow up. Ning Fengji looked out the window, as if looking forward to the distant future. Her martial soul awakens to 8 levels, perhaps she can really break the limit and become the unprecedented 7 Treasures Glass Pagoda title Douluo. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. First Soul Skill, Bibidong's Attitude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 First Soul Skill, Bibidong's Attitude. 7 Treasure Glass Sect. In a picturesque estate, in a beautifully decorated room. Ning Rongrong opened his eyes and tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She is now the hope of the entire 7 Treasures Glass Sect, and naturally will not receive any real punishment. However, in order to temper her character, Ning Fengji deliberately did not arrange a servant, just to let her learn to reflect in loneliness. The surroundings were incredibly quiet, and even the sound of cicadas chirping could be heard. The more in this quiet environment, the easier it is for people to daydream. Unconsciously, a strong sense of loneliness emerged in Ning Rongrong's heart, as if he had been abandoned by the whole world. In her mind, scenes of being with Lin Yi emerged one after another, and her heart suddenly felt a bit sour. Because in the past, when she couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, she would go to find brother Lin Yi and ask him to tell her a story. At that time, no matter how tired brother Lin Yi was, he always looked gentle and never got angry because of it, and every time he tells himself a story, he sleeps very peacefully. But now, Lin Yi has already left the 7 Treasures Glass Sect and will never come back to tell her stories. Did I make a mistake? Ning Rongrong thought with some grievances. Although she has been in confinement these days, she is also aware of what has happened outside and how much the 7 Treasures Glass Sect has lost due to the departure of Sword Douluo. But what did I do wrong again? I just want the freedom to decide my own marriage. I have such a high talent, why can't I even decide on my own marriage and be forced to marry a useless person like Lin Yi? Starry Forest, the core area. Lin Ye's eyes were tightly closed, and a painful expression appeared on his face. Beside him, Sword Douluo also furrowed his brows and had a serious expression on his face. Generally speaking, when a soul master absorbs a soul ring, they can only rely on their own willpower. You cannot sustain it on your own, and no matter how strong the guardian is around you, it is useless. However, there are exceptions to everything. A master at the Douluo level like him naturally possesses 1 or 2 techniques to help soul masters absorb soul rings. Kajin Douluo is also hesitating whether to use it. After all, what Lin Yi absorbed was not the soul ring of the soul beast either. It's the obviously ancient sword grass, which is likely not from this world at all. He doesn't know what will happen if Lin Yi absorbs that thing as a soul ring. Pain. It hurts a lot. This is the only feeling Lin Yi has at this moment. He felt like he was being cut up and down like 1,000 knives. As he absorbed this sword grass, he felt his bones being crushed inch by inch, his nails all over his body as if they were being pulled out directly, and his eyes as if they were being pierced by extremely sharp needles. Although his body did not really suffer any harm, the pain from his soul made him scream like a wild beast. During this process, he could no longer hold on countless times, but the scenes of the past floated through his mind like a lantern. In my past life, I competed with stray dogs for food just to take a bite, on the occasion of the Chinese New Year's Eve, with countless lights shining and everyone reuniting. He was the only one wrapped in a shabby cotton jacket he had picked up, eating dumplings he had picked up from the trash can in the chilly wind, praying for good luck in the coming year after crossing into this world. He enjoyed a happy life every day that he couldn't even imagine in his past life. Therefore, he harbored 10,000 grateful hearts for those who were good to him, such as Ning Fengji and Jian Douluo. That's why he is always obedient to Ning Rongrong, not for anything else, just to repay his kindness. The final scene is the scene of the awakening of the martial soul, which is the clearest and most memorable in Lin Ye's mind. He actually doesn't blame Ning Rongrong, he just doesn't understand one thing. Why? Memories gradually dissipate, and the intense pain gradually fades away. It took about half an hour for Lin Yi to completely absorb the sword grass, adding a brilliant yellow soul ring around her body and possessing her first soul skill. Jian Mang Skill Effect. The tip of the rusty sword will have an additional blade, increasing the attack power of the soul master. The skill description is simple, but Lin Yi is looking forward to it. After enduring the intense pain just now, he finally feels like a 6-year-old child, eager to try his soul skills. But before he even started trying, his face began to look a bit strange. Because he realized that his rusty sword martial soul had an additional effect at this moment, which should be the effect brought by that sword grass, but it was a one-time effect. Helpless. When the Soul Master reaches the level of title Douluo, they have the opportunity to wash away all soul rings and regain them, wash off the soul ring. Lin Yi blinked. He doesn't actually know much about the martial soul world, but he can also guess the value of this effect. When he became a title Douluo, the other title Douluo martial souls were yellow, yellow, purple, purple, black, 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 and black. Only he could achieve black, 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 or red, 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 and red. All of them are eternal soul rings, even all of them are 100,000-year soul rings. How cool this is. What washes away the soul ring? Sword Douluo asked. Lin Yi immediately told Sword Douluo about the new effect of his rusty sword martial soul. Sword Douluo's already extremely shocked expression has now become even more shocking. He was stunned for a long time before spitting out 2 words from his mouth. Abnormal. However, thinking of Lin Yi growing up in the future and becoming a title Douluo, wearing a soul ring of 10,000 or 100,000 years, appearing in front of Ning Rongrong, his lips slightly curled up, looking like a returning crooked-mouthed dragon king. Think about that scene, it's very pleasant. Then, Lin Yi began to try his first soul skill. He gently raised his hand and summoned the rusty sword. Amidst the surge of soul power, the tip of the rusty sword spewed out a blade that was about a foot long. Gently stroke. As if there was no tofu, the rusty sword evenly cut a stone on the roadside in 2 pieces. This kind of scene makes Jian Douluo shudder inwardly. You don't have the destructive power that a soul master with level 10 soul power should have, sighed Sword Douluo. If it weren't for the many surprises you brought me today, I would probably be shocked to see this scene. After speaking, the 2 of them looked at each other and smiled. Lin Yi also felt like he had a dog poop luck today. No, he should have fallen into a pile of dog poop. His harvest today is really too rich. Becoming born full of soul power again, awakening 2 extremely abnormal martial souls, Rust Sword and Void Swallowing Flame. Both martial souls can be increased without limits, and they also possess the divine skill of Naiha, which can wash soul rings. He simply calculated that if he could become a title Douluo in the future, the combat power of Rust Sword would definitely increase to an extremely terrifying level. Soul rings start from 10,000 years, and the second martial soul, Void Swallowing Flame, is not in a hurry to absorb soul rings. It will definitely start from 10,000 years of soul rings. And it can also weaken 90% of the combat power of sword martial souls, and is immune to mental damage. Such a title Douluo may be able to defeat 10 title Douluo of the same level, right? Don't expose your second martial soul to anyone, Jian Douluo reminded, afraid that Lin Yi wouldn't pay attention. In addition to using the devouring talent to increase your soul power, do not use it unless your life is at stake, and do not think of hunting soul beasts to attach soul rings to your Void Swallowing Flame martial soul. The enhancement of soul rings on the body and spirit of soul masters is very terrifying. In the future, it is best to add soul rings to your Void Swallowing Flame at once after being granted the title Douluo level. Do you remember? I know, Lin Yi nodded. For some reason, he suddenly remembered the other half of the sword energy that had just penetrated his body. Half of the sword energy just now has already advanced my martial soul to this level. What about the remaining half? At the same time, the martial soul hall has dispatched batches of spies. Their entire function is to search everywhere for traces related to Sword Douluo and the child named Lin Yi, find Sword Douluo and convey to him the sincerity of Bibidong. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. I don't want to agree either, but she gave me too much. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. I don't want to agree either, but she gave me too much time is like water in a toilet, rushing away with a clatter. Another 5 days have passed. In the past few days, Douluo has been traveling with Lin Yi, giving him some insights into the mainland. At the same time, we are also helping Lin Yi plan his future development path. After all, Lin Yi's innate talent is terrifying, and he still needs to grow. Let's set a small goal first, become a title Douluo within 10 years. Do you have confidence? Douluo looked at Lin Yi and said enthusiastically. Lin Yi. No, 10 years later, I was only 16 years old. The title Douluo at the age of 16 has never appeared in the history of Douluo continent, has it? Without any confusion on Lin Yi's face, Sword Douluo continued to plan excitedly. Let me calculate, your current soul power is level 10, and the soul power of the title Douluo is level 90. In 10 years, you only need to increase your soul power by 80 levels. If you calculate, you only need to increase your soul power by 8 levels per year, and in just over a month, you only need to increase it by 1 level. Isn't that enough? Lin Yi. For some reason, the sword-fighting Luo at this moment reminded him of the parents who worked hard to force their children to work hard in their past lives. However, the difference is that those parents often have little ability on their own, just like a bird. They can't fly on their own, so they lay an egg and desperately force that egg to fly. And Douluo himself is a powerhouse standing at the top of the continent. Of course, the level of soul power is important, and the combat power of soul masters is also important. If you become a soul master with only a realm but no combat power, it will become a joke. Fortunately, the Four Elements Academy is very suitable for you. It can not only absorb your void-swallowing flame martial soul, but also have enough young soul masters to enhance your rust sword martial soul's combat power. I have decided, so you can go to Qianshui Academy first. That academy is full of beautiful students, and you can also find some future wives by the way. You happen to be quite old now, and it's time to consider dating. Then the Divine Wind, Blaze, and Thunder Academy will all be challenged once, and after the selection, all the geniuses from the Kendo Star Luo Royal Academy will also be selected. At that time, your rust sword martial soul should be able to grow to an invincible level. Remember to tell everyone then, you are my disciple of Sword Douluo, let my old face shine a little. Lin Yi. Why don't you just say, let me defeat all the young geniuses of the entire Douluo continent? Also, who cares? I'm not young anymore. I'm only 6 years old, how come it's time to find a wife? I haven't fully developed yet. After finishing these words, Sword Douluo finally said with satisfaction. I don't have high expectations for you either. If you can achieve these goals within 10 years and then find a few beautiful wives, that's about it. As a person, you should accept your ordinariness. Being ordinary is also a kind of happiness. Lin Yi opened his mouth and wanted to say something. In the past, Sword Douluo was always a highly respected figure in front of him. After spending these days together, Douluo's character can be said to have collapsed and cannot be further destroyed. You're just like a rogue old man. But at this moment, his heart twitched and he suddenly felt a sense of being peeped at. Zheng, a sword roared. The rusty sword martial soul quietly emerged. However, Sword Douluo's movements were faster than Lin Yi's. He looked directly into the deep forest and let out a low cry. Get out! A thunderous explosion. Lin Yi felt like his eardrums were about to crack open, but fortunately, Sword Douluo immediately protected him with his soul power. The next moment, a rustling sound sounded. 5 people dressed in black with extremely concealed breath fell directly from a tree in the distance. The leader hurriedly pulled out a token with a pattern consisting of a dragon, sword, hammer, crown, ghost, and a yellow chrysanthemum. People from the martial soul hall. Sword Douluo's face was slightly cold. Hide your head and expose your tail, seek death. Although the Martial Soul Hall has done many practical things over the years, it has always maintained a superficial respect and a covert suppression attitude towards the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect. Although he no longer has much emotional attachment to the Seven Treasures and Glass Sect, he does not have a favorable impression of the Martial Soul Hall. Sword Douluo lifted his right hand lightly, and a white sword aura appeared on his fingertips, ready to be swung at any time. Some of the soul rings on these black-clothed people have already appeared as protectors on their own. All three of them are at the level of Soul Kings, and they are considered experts on the Douluo continent. However, in front of a titled Douluo who is known for his attacks, it may not take a breath to kill them. Sword Douluo, I have a secret order from the Pope's crown on me. The leader was originally still surprised why his and others' secret methods were exposed so quickly. Seeing that Sword Douluo had already developed a murderous heart, he quickly shouted out this sentence at the fastest speed possible, afraid that if he spoke slowly, he and others would be gone. Bibidong's secret order. Sword Douluo's eyebrows remained furrowed. He can guess with his but what Bibidong wants to do. It's just that I knew he had a falling out with the Seven Treasures Glass Sect and wanted to recruit him. The weasel pays New Year's greetings to the chicken, but has no good intentions. Sword Douluo snorted coldly in his heart as he took the secret letter, wanting to see its contents. When opening the letter, there was still a slight sneer at the corner of his mouth. Do Bibidong think I'm the kind of person who can be easily moved? Just left the Seven Treasures Glass Sect and then transferred to the Martial Soul Hall. How will the people of the world see me? How will I handle myself? The Pope of the Hall of Martial Souls has done such a ridiculous thing, it's just a disgrace to himself. However, when he saw the contents of the secret letter, Jian Douluo suddenly froze in place. With enough natural resources and earthly treasures, Lin Yi will obtain the position of the Holy Son of the Martial Soul Hall. These two conditions, each with unparalleled precision, hit the heart of Sword Douluo. He is already at this age, and he is also the top expert in the mainland. What do you want? His only hope now is for Lin Yi to quickly grow up, become a titled Douluo, and then fight his sword. That's right, Sword Douluo is also selfish. After becoming the most aggressive Douluo in the mainland, he has rarely encountered opponents in this world. The few people who can fight him are either old monsters that cannot be seen in the world, or a group of people from Haotian's sect that cannot be found at all. After seeing the sword energy, his soul power level broke through to level 97, but since then, he has never been able to break through again. Now, Lin Ye's talent is so incredible, he is a twin martial soul, and he is naturally full of soul power. Both martial souls can be upgraded without limits. One of the martial souls is still unclear, and he may not even belong to the top sword martial souls in Douluo continent. This made Jian Douluo unable to resist imagining that after Lin Yi became a titled Douluo, wouldn't he be able to have an opponent? And the condition of Tian Kai Dibao perfectly meets the requirements of Lin Ye's void-swallowing flame martial soul, which can accelerate Lin Ye's growth speed extremely quickly. As for the second condition, the Holy Son of the Martial Soul Hall made Sword Douluo a bit amused. Because the Holy Son of the Martial Soul Hall can participate in the competition for the position of Pope. He was well aware of Bibidong's thoughts, but he heard that Lin Yi was just a useless martial soul with half an innate soul power. Even if he was given the position of Holy Son, he could only be a wealthy and idle person, but now, Lin Ye's martial soul has been restored. And he also possesses a talent that even he feels intimidated by. As soon as he thought of his disciples' hope of becoming the Pope of the Martial Soul Hall in the future, Sword Douluo's mood suddenly brightened. Bibidong, you probably wouldn't have thought that your actions were leading wolves into the house. End of this chapter.